Today I'm going to show you how to draw this manga image in ArtRage Lite. I'm starting just with the default canvas, no changes, normal canvas size, nothing special yet. So the first thing I'm going to do is just rough out a basic sketch of my painting. So I've got it pinned up as a reference here, so I actually know what I'm doing. If you don't know how to draw a certain style or what look you want, you can just pin them up around your canvas as you work. Now, I like working with a bit of canvas texture when I'm sketching. You may not. You can use any tool you like for the initial sketches. You can delete it later and you'll be using other layers. So it is entirely a matter of preference. If you don't like all this texture, I'll show you how to get rid of it in a minute. You can rough out some shading, or you can just leave it sketchy. Now, if you don't like this pencil-y sketchy effect, you can experiment with the pencil settings. You can switch to precise mode, which gives you a smooth, sort of more mechanical pencil, and even has a smoothing option. You can go to the canvas settings and disable the canvas roughness to 0%, so that there will be absolutely no texture for the pencil. You'll still get tilt, unless you go to precise, in which case you won't. You can also go to something like the ink pen and make sure that it's just really straightforward. One single smooth line, no pressure variation, no fancy effects or bit of smoothing if you want, and then just draw. So that's a much harder, stronger line than the pencil tool will give you. Or you can use the felt pen, which is also quite neat for this sort of thing, and will actually give you some canvas texture. So, yeah, doesn't matter. You sketch whatever you want, however you're comfortable, and the first sketch will be a bit of a mess no matter what you do. The next step is to actually clean that up. So what we're going to do now is you add a new layer. You can either refine that sketch by just going over it again, or you can jump straight to inking. Now I'm going to jump to the actual painting file rather than slowly redrawing everything again. So here we go. So just jump to my sketch layer down here. If you press Alt, what I just did there, or Option if you're on a Mac, and click on the eye while you're doing that, it toggles everything at once. So that's quite handy. You can see I've got quite a few layers there in my original drawing. So the next step, once you've got something you're happy with, you can see here there's a bit of canvas texture in the pencil strokes, and it's a bit of a mess. It doesn't look quite like the one I just did, but that's because I was just, doing it as I went. Let's put that up there as a reference. Now, from this point on, I don't want canvas texture. I want a perfectly white background. So I'm going to go to the canvas settings, which are under View. And I made a preset earlier for this, so if I go down to Special, you can use Cell, which gives you a transparent background and no texture, or this is the one I just made. So the important things here is the canvas color, because the default canvas color is not white. It's slightly off-white because that's a natural looking canvas. So you need to go into luminance and make it 100%. That's totally bright, pure white. Or you can just, drag it over here. Opacity is up to you. It depends if you want a transparent background or not. And the other important thing is roughness. It needs to be 0. If you go to the negatives or the positives, then you're just getting, you're just inverting the canvas texture. So we'll just get that texture back. So that's my background. The other thing that you need to be aware of is the lighting. ArtRage's lighting effects are currently off, So it's what lets it get all those shadows for the thick paint, so you can see what's happening. The ink pen has no shadows, it's completely flat. So I can either press F5 to toggle that, or I can go back to the canvas settings. And the reason this matters is because there's a very subtle gradient in the background here from the lighting effect, and you probably won't notice it while you're actually drawing, but after you've exported the image it might be really annoying. So if you go see the canvas settings here, you can just toggle it on and off, and you can see how the oil tube changes. It only matters if you're using something thick with texture like canvas texture or the oil tube brush. The texture of the canvas and the paint is still there, so that's completely separate. You can have a textured canvas with no visible texture, it just shows up when you're drawing, like that. Or you can have a completely smooth canvas and canvas lighting. So those are the important things. Change the colour, change the texture, change the lighting. And now I'm going to add, what I would do next is I'd ink it. So I'd add a new layer and switch to the ink pen, which is this one. Yeah, so now I would need to decide what kind of effects I wanted. There is an inking preset that is quite useful, which is not fully installed. Yep, so that's there. This is the one I used while I was inking most of this drawing. So you can change all the settings over here to get different effects. And you can also download a complete package file of presets for ArtRage Lite. ArtRage 5 has the same ones, but it also has some extra ones. Whichever one you install will show up in both Lite and ArtRage 5, so I uninstalled everything so that there weren't any confusing presets while I did this tutorial. So these are all the brush presets that are in here for the different tools. So this is the ink pen in the middle here. You can choose which ones you want. So I'm just going to install everything, and there we go. So yeah, that was not package file, so now I have a duplicate. So you can work just from presets, or you can experiment with the tool settings. There are some settings that you need to change as you draw, and these are smoothing and taper length. And the reason for that is because they look different at different size strokes. You see there? So you can change the size of your stroke by clicking here, or dragging on there, but it only goes up to 100, or by holding Shift and then dragging all the way up or all the way down, like that. And ArtRage will go up to 500% in ArtRage Lite. So then you start inking these using whatever settings you like, and maybe that's too sideways. Yep. You see it's quite thick, and maybe I want less dramatic tapering. Or maybe I don't want a round brush, I want a sideways, a thin brush like that, so I would change the aspect and add a bit more taper to smooth out the ends. If you adjust the pressure, it lets you control how much it changes as you draw with pressure around your stroke. Like that. 50% gives you the widest possible range because it can go down to 0 or up to 100. If you want a very fixed line, stick it at 100 and use aspect and taper length to control. Don't stick it up to 100, sorry, stick it up to about 90 because it's still got to have some space to move inside that. As you can see, you just keep inking until you're happy with it. I'm pressing Alt to rotate the canvas and right click. You can also go up to the canvas positioner here. This was added in the version 5.04 update, which was quite recent. If you don't have this, you need to update ArtRage Lite. You can do that in the member area on our website. So, yep, so as you can see, nice smoothing, nice taper makes it very easy to get different effects. you'll want different weights for the hair and the eyes and whatever you're doing. And rotating makes it much easier to get certain strokes. So I want to draw that curve there. If you want to do a curve, push away. It makes it much easier. And if you want to do a nice straight line, pull towards you, straight down. Now see that taper? You don't want that taper there. It looks weird. So you turn the taper off and just use pressure to do that. The pen will also tilt as you draw, which you can't always see, but as you tilt the pen, it will tilt. If you don't want tilt, you probably just want to stick the aspect up to 100 so there's no visible tilting. You can turn the tilting off completely in ArtRage 5, but this doesn't have advanced stylus properties, so you can't do anything with it. So let's just assume I've drawn my whole layer. And just hide that. I'll press D to get this back in the middle like that. There are lots of keyboard shortcuts. They make it a lot easier. I don't even use this very much because I know what all the keyboard shortcuts are. You can go to Edit, Set Keyboard Shortcuts to browse all the ones for ArtRage. So in here you can see how to jump between the different tools, some tool size changes, pressure even, stuff like that. There's a lot in there, you can change them. So now I have my ink layer, I do not need the sketch layer anymore. I mean, you can like map out the shading areas on a different layer if you don't feel very confident or you know they need to go in a certain place. I'm just kind of winging it. So the next step is to completely fill the hair, and I'm doing that on a new layer. I've done this already. So you can do that either by colouring it manually with the felt pen or the ink pen. If you colour with the ink pen, turn this smoothing and taper off so you can just get a completely normal solid stroke like that. Fill it with black. You want it as dark as possible. Or use the fill tool. Yeah, use the fill tool. If you use the fill tool, make sure you don't have gaps because it will just flood out through those. ArtRage 5 actually has an option to ignore gaps like this so it won't flood out. But this is not ArtRage 5, so you can't use that. Even though I keep automatically trying to do things like that. So instead you just want to fill in, turn spread off. Spread is one of my problems here. And current layer only, yeah, so double check all your settings before you do stuff. And you can block gaps off on the layer you're filling in so you don't have to mess with your line art. I'm not doing a very good job, am I? There we go. So yeah, you can do that. Fill in all the hair with black until you get this, or something like that. Let's see. Yes. And what I do then is I hide everything except this layer. I then export this entire layer image as a new stencil. So it's just a black and white image. You can keep the lines if you like. I did actually for my other one. And then what you do now is you hide this because you don't need it. You go to Stencils and you import that image. So there's the hair stencil I just made. Then I go to Transform and I line it up over my canvas. This is why it helps to export the entire image just as it is, because now you can line up each side. If you're using ArtRage 5, you can convert a layer into a temporary stencil, so you don't have to do the whole export-import thing. But this works fine. You just want to get that exactly right. You can also use keyboard shortcuts, so if you press Control, not while the transform is going, but so if you press Control, you can zoom in and out, and Alt, you can do this. And yeah, let's put that back. So now everything except my hair is completely masked. So what I can do now is I can just colour it. So now I have a solid base colour for my hair. If I want to colour everything around that, I can now invert the stencil and colour inside and outside. I also did the same thing with the skin. It helps if you do the hair first and then the skin, because you've got something blocking the outside the skin, and it makes it much easier to colour it in like that. So that was the practice, yeah. So if I go back here, that's the skin one I made. Again, I need to fit it over the entire canvas. I will just use Control to tidy it up the last bit of the way. You right click to move them. Now with this giant stencil over everything, it's quite difficult to use my keyboard shortcuts and right clicking to move around, so this is actually a bit more helpful. Suddenly you move right in, you can see if it's lined up or not. Okay, there we go, we have two stencils now. You can see all the active stencils here, and you can hide them as you work, and you can invert them. You can even flip them, though that doesn't help much. It does help when you're inking though. So if I just hide everything, if you're having trouble drawing lines, you can just flip the whole canvas or rotate it. So if you transform and just flip, sometimes it's easier to see what you're doing, and you can flip it back later when you've finished. So now I have blocked in this canvas layer. As you can see here, I messed up that bit when I was colouring and I didn't notice. So this is actually why it helps to have multiple stencils. You can see there that the hair is, that section of hair is masked by the skin stencil. So instead, I can layer those stencils and use them to make sure I cover every single bit of the canvas that I need to. Now to actually finish colouring this hair, I'm going to the felt pen. I'll just hide everything. And I'm going to colour on the same layer because I want to use ArtRage's blending stuff. So the felt pen here has several different options available. If you just want to lay down a lot of thick colour, you just put the art pen on and don't worry too much about everything. So now for my colours, I have been collecting the colours as I went from the previous image. You open the samples, you click Add Sample, and your current colour is added. So it's very easy to just keep a whole reference palette of colours. You can also pick directly from the reference image or your current canvas. You use the sampler tool, or you press Alt shortcut and click like that. You can also choose with and without lighting. So if you're getting annoying highlights or something, but because we've got the lighting off, that doesn't matter. So I'm pressing M for the marker, and now I'm going to start. You can see that it blends there. But so if I just quickly block in some shadows, and the stencils make this really easy. I don't have to worry where I'm drawing really, I just have to block out the shapes. And then highlights. Yeah, so that's just lots of big wide strokes really. So if I adjust softness, I have a really large tool size. Softness is how soft the tip of the pen is. So when you push down, does it squash out or not? If it's a very hard pen, it won't. If it's a very soft pen, then it will, so you can get all kinds of different sizes. So this is great if you want nice controlled strokes. Wetness is how wet it is. So is the ink very dry and will it just sort of block down solidly without mixing? Or is it very wet and will it blend as it goes? If you want lots of canvas texture, you want a very dry felt tip pen and canvas texture, which I've turned off so you can't see anything anyway. Pressure is just how hard you're pushing, so it helps you adjust the results you're getting. So if you turn the art pen off, you get a different kind of felt pen. Yeah, so if you've ever used a Copic marker, you'll know that white is not white, it's a blender. So unless you buy a special white ink pen that actually lets you add pure white ink, here you can see that's white ink and this is blending white ink. So if I turn this off, so it's just washing it away, and that's the canvas underneath showing through, so as you can see if I change the colour or something. Whereas over here, the art pen is actually laying down real white ink. So let's just get rid of that again. So if you just want to get solid colour, you want to turn art pen on. If you want to have interesting effects and layers, you want to turn it off. And you just keep doing that until you're happy with the results. You can also have multiple colour layers. So if I decide I don't like green, I could have pink. Let's get a really big brush so I can see what I'm doing. Yeah, so you can just keep doing different layers until you like the look of it. Yeah, so now I've done the hair. So now I want to do the skin. So I would just go here and invert my stencils, and hide the hair one maybe. Yeah, because I don't need to worry about the hair, I just want to work on the skin. And I would do exactly the same thing, block it out, and then blend in with the different colours and the felt pen. And once I've done that, you can invert the skin again to do the eyes. Whoops, if you click on that, it adds a new one. So yeah, so I just blended away with the felt pen until I liked it. Dark at the top, lighter below. I'm just going to quickly show you how I would use the fill tool in ArtRage 5 because it's a lot smarter than the fill tool in ArtRage Lite. As you can see, there's a lot more settings here. You don't need to worry about those for now. This is what I would be using in Lite. Now, slow motion lets you watch the progress of the fill until you can find out where it's leaking out. The higher you set it, the slower it will go. And if you want it to stop, you just press escape. So what I could do is I could just keep using slow motion, see where all the gaps are, and then fill them in by hand, but I don't want to do that. So I'm going to increase gap tolerance. Gap tolerance means that it will not pass through any gap that is smaller than the size you have set there. So that is currently 26 pixels. I'm working on quite a small canvas size, so 26 pixels is quite a big gap here. As you can see, it can't pass through the narrow hair strands, and it also does not pass out into the face or the background. But we still have a problem. You can probably see it quite clearly. It's this really horrible, ugly white pixel border effect. This is a problem in every single digital art program, except for MS Paint, and there is a reason for that. MS Paint is just pixels, blocky single pixels. So you can see the horrible jagged edges as you draw. Other art programs, like real art programs, more advanced art programs do something called anti-aliasing. Anti-aliasing is how these lines are made nice and smooth, and it does it by adding lots of little semi-transparent pixels along the edges there. So this little fringe is why your lines look much smoother. Now this plays absolute havoc with the fill tool, unfortunately. It does this because the fill tool works by flooding one colour until it meets a different colour and then it stops. So if you have very solid pixels like that on the right, it can fill every single one of them and then stops because it knows what it's doing. But it's really ugly. Whereas on the left here, where you have the anti-aliasing, it's got all these transparent pixels. What does it do? It doesn't know, so it doesn't fill them properly. To get around this, you need to tell the fill tool where to stop filling, so it doesn't have to figure it out for itself. And you do this by switching to the border tab. So I'm using a black and white line art, which means my border is going to be pure black, which is very easy. If I'm using a slightly different range of colours, it can get a little complicated sometimes. So I have my nice pure black and white lines here. So my border is black. I'll just stick that gap tolerance back up and I will fill. As you can see, there are absolutely no horrible lines. It is completely smooth and completely solid. So in ArtRage 5, I can ignore the gaps, I can find the gaps, and I can fill right up to a border without leaving any nasty white edges. And that means that I can use this for a stencil really easily, and it's much smoother and faster to make. I can also just convert this into a stencil immediately without having to export it and import it, so it's much easier to just make a stencil, add it, start messing around, adding colour. If you don't want to mess around with stencils, there is one other option, and it's the selection tool. It has a few different shapes, but the one we want here is the magic wand. So what you would do is, instead of turning that layer into a stencil, you would block out your base layer with any colour. In fact, it can actually be quicker to just block it in with the base pink or green, the hair and skin, before you add any blending. But it has to be all one colour for this to work easily. And then you just select it. And that means that instead of having to fiddle around with a stencil, you've just got an active layer. As you can see there, which means you can just colour away inside it. You will have to, again, you'll have to watch out for sharp edges or gaps, anything like that, because all it's doing is selecting on that area of paint of a single colour. ArtRage 5 has a few more options for selections, but it's the same basic process. You block out your area of paint, you select it, and then you work inside it. Now, the only problem with doing it this way is that if you've got a lot of fiddly bits, it can be quite difficult selecting them all and keeping track of everything. And if you stop having a single solid layer of colour, it can be very hard to select it again if you accidentally lose the selection or you need to go back later. So either you need to keep a base layer around to select from, or you need to get very good at, say, selecting the background and then inverting it to get the bit you need. So stencils are a bit more work to set up, but you can keep coming back to them whenever you need them. And you can move them around and change the shape. You can even have transparent stencils with gradients, which can be quite fun if, say, you want a gradient on the hair. So you can see there's a stencil gradient. You can sort of do the same thing with selections. So let's just create a new selection here. It's feathered, which means it's got a gradient going around the outside. And you could do that with the magic wand as well. So you might also want to use both that way. So if I want to keep that pink hair, I just want to clean up a bit. I just erase around the outside. So once you're done, change the background if you want to get a nice paper texture, maybe. Sort out the lighting if you want to export it and have it be completely white with no texture. And then I just have to show the layer that I wanted to use and choose which hair colour I wanted.